Everyone, we are going to start the program now, and the morning session, and the panel is going to be called Doing Business with DHS. Will be moderated by Michael Darios, who as SES currently serves as the Senior Procurement Executive and Head Contracting Activity for the Coast Guard. And Michael, in this capacity, has responsibility for all contracting functions within the agency, which includes the management of 500 civilian and military folks. I'm sure you may or may not be aware of this, but the Coast Guard spends about $3 billion a year in acquisitions procurement through about 40,000 transactions. So I think that means that's good for both large and small business, right? So excited about this panel. Mike is also a well-recognized leader, as you saw in coming in and meeting a lot of folks that he knows pretty well. Prior to joining the Coast Guard, Mike worked over at the TSA and actually was a plank holder, if I'm not mistaken, was there in the beginning, stood it up, and also helped with the transition into DHS. And over at TSA, he was in charge of the Threat Assessment Management Division, which I believe was about $2 billion worth of work each year. Also with the Checkpoint Technology Division that procured and deployed the nationwide fleet of passenger and carry-on baggage screening equipment, which I think amounted to about $5 billion overall in costs. So, and Mike has received a number of awards, including the DHS Secretary's Award for Team Excellence and the DHS Small Business Advocate of the Year. So please welcome our moderator and the panel. Welcome, Mike Darios.
Well, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right. So I apologize that this got bumped a little bit, but whenever there's precipitation in the air and it's DC, you know, traffic comes to a grinding halt. But we're going to make up for it by hopefully delivering a very good panel for you here. I think this is going to be a good discussion. So I'm joined by my counterparts across the enterprise here. I want to introduce you to Ms. Diane Sahakian to my left. She is the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Acquisition and the Head of Contracting Activity at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And then Mr. Bill Weinberg is joining us as well. He is the Chief Acquisition Officer and the HCA Head of Contracting Activity at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. So thank you for Diane and Bill both being here. So we're gonna offer some tips and trends to you today. And I thought that a good way to segue into that would be to talk about something that we just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, and that's the Acquisition Planning Forecast System, APFS Mandatory Update. Every year, all of the DHS components are required to do an update to forecast our procurement opportunities for the year. And I'm going to do a little bit of shameless bragging here. At Coast Guard, over the course of the last 2 years, we've really taken APFS very seriously. And cumulatively, over the course of the last 2 years, we've increased our entries now by close to 70% in terms of the number of entries that are in the system to start the new fiscal year off, or close to it, I guess. So September 1st, you can go in there and you can start to see what's coming out. I think it's important for companies, large and small, to go into APFS and to see what's out there. It gives you an opportunity to do your teaming up front and early, start to target the opportunities, see which ones look like a good fit for you, and gives you the opportunity to also get into the agencies if you can, and make some inroads with the right program folks, the right contracting folks, to talk about the opportunities. And APFS is just something that I think in general industry needs to be paying close attention to, because DHS is definitely trying to treat it with the importance that it deserves. I want to tout a couple of other things, and then we're going to open it up to the panelists. So the DHS vendor outreach sessions, those are free. You should take advantage of those. Those are opportunities for you to get in and engage early. And I think that finding out about when those are and getting the opportunity to attend those is also something that benefits industry, gives you the opportunity to interface with government folks. We learn from you and vice versa. And then, I'll end my portion of this before we really get into the Q&As by talking about something that it seems like a no-brainer, but I think that a lot of times companies struggle with this, whether to respond to the RFI or not. So it's a decision, right? You have to make a decision about whether or not you think that it's mature enough. Is it something the agency is going to get funded for? Is it something that's real or not? Do you want to invest any time, energy, and money into responding to an RFI? I would strongly encourage you to do so. So when we are putting RFIs out, I think I can speak for my counterparts here and our contracting officers. That's real deal market research. It's real deal. We are looking to see if we can establish the rule of two. We're looking to see whether or not there are enough small businesses that are interested parties to set something aside or not. And so, especially for the small businesses in the room, if you are debating about whether or not you should respond to an RFI, I would encourage you to definitely take the opportunity to respond to those. Usually, government agencies are not asking for a whole lot of documentation on those, and I think by staking your claim early and letting us know that you are in fact an interested party and that this is something that you've got the capability to deliver on, really helps us. It helps us to inform our acquisition strategy, helps to inform the requirements, and obviously helps to inform whether or not we've got a potential set aside or whether or not we're going to go full and open on something. So if you're debating and if you've got the opportunity and the bandwidth, I would always encourage you to respond to the RFIs. So that's just some introductory tips that I wanted to offer to you. And now I'm going to actually open it up to our panelists here. And I'm going to start by asking Mr. Weinberg a question. So, Bill, when it comes to responding to DHS requirements, in general, what are some tips that you have, especially for small businesses trying to do business with DHS?
Well, can you hear me? Is this going out? Okay, great. Well, Mike, thank you for that totally impromptu and unexpected question. And let me see what my unexpected answer. Seriously, as Mike said, the first thing in tips about responding is do respond. We cannot consider your input or thoughts if you don't tell us what they are. I think a lot of people have considered RFIs and sources sought notices in the past to be the government checking to make sure that we can do a sole source procurement. We're in a different age now with technology moving as fast as it is, and the commercial place moving as fast as it is, that we're really seeking to understand what's out there and what the possibilities are to be able to solve the challenges that we have. So when we issue something, it's a considered ask, and we are looking for people to respond. And we are genuinely working with our requirements people to use that input to formulate the requirements. So if you have something to say, we need to hear what it is. Years ago they came up with the if you see something, say something, and that applies to almost everything. If you see something, a source of sought notice, say something. Tell us what you think, we don't know what other agencies or commercial enterprises are doing. When we put out a challenge, or you see something in the news and you say, we did something like that for NSA, or we did something like that for the FBI, we need to know about that. So the first tip is, I think, to respond. And we genuinely will consider that. And we're, as the leaders of the procurement organizations, I think the HCA Council is firmly behind using that information and encouraging our requiring activities to listen and to be open to ideas. Because if you work inside the government, you're not going to know what's going on out there unless you come to an event like this and you go through the sponsors, booths and things like that and see what's going on. But a lot of government people don't have time to really engage with the commercial sector and see what's going on out there, so that can influence their requirements generation. Also, I think another tip is to always ask questions. People have viewed that differently over the years. If I ask a question, it seems like I don't know what I'm talking about, or I don't know what they're talking about. But questions generally help influence requirements also. When we put something out, we think we understand what it means, we think we understand what we're talking about, but somebody reading it for the first time may have questions, and those questions generally identify gaps that are going to show up in performance down the road. So it's helpful to understand what we're going into on both sides, that the questions generate communication on both sides. Another tip, and this is about doing business with DHS, we've sort of focused on advice to small businesses because large businesses maybe don't need as much advice, but I would say on both sides of that equation, don't be afraid to partner and subcontract. Opportunities and work are better than being left out or not participating at all. As a partner, a subcontractor, as a small business starting out, as a large business trying to increase your capability and portfolio, partnering should not be considered a bad thing. Experience that you can parlay into more work going forward is more beneficial than not actually getting work. Survival is tough. Government budgets are shrinking in certain areas. As Mr. Fulgham said earlier, level is the new up. If your budget is constant, that's a win for the agency. But we're not increasing budgets 2 and 3 times. So maintaining a portfolio of work is important, whether that's as a partner, subcontractor, mentor, protege, whatever. Consider every opportunity to get business and grow your experience as we try to use experience and past performance more in making source selection decisions. I don't want to take up all the time here. We can kind of address some other things if you want to move on to another topic, and we can come back to some of these things later as they come up.
I'll ask you, Bill, can you talk a little bit about the DHS strategic sourcing vehicles? Because I think that industry has a lot of questions about those, and what are required vehicles, and are there opportunities to go outside of those vehicles? Do we have preferences? Is there a waiver process? Could you talk to any of that?
I can talk about that a little bit. Is Soraya here? Okay. So what as you know, people in the room, DHS has many strategic sourcing vehicles. In the IT world, the biggest one obviously is Eagle 2, and the first source vehicle for hardware and software. They've become required sources of supply for DHS components unless there's an exception or some reason that they're not available. I certainly counsel my agency and my contracting officers to think about the mission and think about what is required and who provides those types of services. So when we look at the Eagle 2 portfolio of vendors and we don't see the capability that we're looking for, we will advise or advocate for using GSA or using Alliant or using Oasis or using whatever is out there that is going to meet the mission requirements. And we can deal with the mandatory use if necessary. There's a lot of things that Eagle 2 is fine for, but one of the questions people ask is, I'm not on Eagle 2, how can I do business with DHS? We award, and I think the last event I was at, they talked about like 60% of DHS awards were to first-time DHS contractors. So there are certainly opportunities for things that are not covered by Eagle, program management type things. We did away with the tabs vehicle in favor of Oasis, in favor of using GSA in general. So we're going to go where the capability exists to meet the requirements. And when we put out an RFI or something, if we get sufficient response from people, either on the vehicle or not on a vehicle, we're going to gravitate towards vehicles that meet our needs. Because as, even though this, procurement and acquisition is not performing the mission, we're enabling the mission. I mean, everything we do should be focused on delivering mission capability. And wherever we can find that is where we're going to go to get that. There's a lot of vehicles out there. There are rumors about the future of some of these vehicles maybe not being necessary. I believe Eagle was created in an environment where GSA didn't provide us the tools to be able to do what we needed to do. Things are a lot different now. GSA has really stepped up to provide the ability to do set-asides, to do small business tracks, to do a lot more SINs or types of services, and they create new services, and they're keeping a breath. They've got cloud services now. They've got data management. They have a lot of specialties that we didn't have years ago. So the need for agency-specific vehicles is probably going down. So we're going to examine, what we need to do going forward, I think, hopefully collaboratively in the department to see whether we want to have all these mandatory strategic sourcing vehicles or use the marketplace. And I would say we invite thoughts from Eagle 2 holders, non-Eagle 2 holders, what do they think? I believe collaboration is the way we're going to solve problems in the future, and so we'd like to hear about it. What do you think about the vehicles? What's good about it? What's not good about it? Obviously, we used to have people coming in, praising Alliance Small Business until you realize there's only 14 companies, and that's why they're supporting it. So I think there's opportunities in all those veins.
Thanks for those insights, Bill. I think that's good stuff, and we'll go ahead and take the conversation in a different direction now. So, Diane, interested in your thoughts on the plight of the mid-tier company. So, we hear a lot about companies, at that mid-tier level, really not being able to compete with the large businesses just yet. But they're also not really eligible for the set-aside work anymore. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I do have thoughts about that. In my several years of experience with contracting, we'll just leave it at that, I can't tell you how many times a graduated 8A who has been an incumbent performing work for us for a number of years and doing a fine job has come to my office complaining that a contracting officer will not, do away with the 8A set aside so that they can compete as a small business on a contract that they used to perform. And I just sit there and I'm like, I can't believe you're saying this to me. I mean, for 10 years, this company has had the knowledge that they're going to be coming out of the program, and there needs to be, and this is a tip, this is a great business for somebody to be in. How do you hold the hand of those companies as they graduate so they get to that next level of being able to successfully compete after their status is over? It's a problem, I'm telling you, because what happens, a lot of companies after that 10 years, they can't find their footing. I don't know, I've never done the research, but I'm sure a lot of them just either go under or get bought out. But to the ones that really are offering a benefit and really are good, and there's so many of them, what can we do, corporate, what can we do to get them to that next level? First thing is, I tell everybody who comes to meet me, if you're not on GSA's schedule, you're crazy. And you would be surprised how many companies come in to do business with like CBP and they're not on GSA's schedule. Like, are you living under a rock? I mean, you have to start with being on, you have to do that. And once they do that, then they're playing in the federal game. They get to understand the mechanisms of how to submit a proposal, how to get yourself, what a contract looks like. And that's the starting point. And then I tell them, agencies are using tools like reverse auctioning. At CBP, we've been using that for like 15 years. We don't even talk about it anymore. It's just like normal. And now GSA has come up with a great tool. If companies aren't invested or looking in those tools, they're going to miss a lot of the business, which is probably good for small business. Because at CBP, just to keep the lights on is about $2.5 billion a year, just to keep the lights on. Keep the animals fed, the agents dressed, the ammunition, the boats, the planes. And that's like constant steady work. So even in a bad year, I could close my eyes and say, even if like the appropriation, if we got less money than ever, we're still gonna be spending about $2.6 billion. On a good year, when we get more money to buy things, we'll be $3 billion or over. But just think about what it takes to sustain that. And we don't want the same companies all the time. We want to see innovation. We want somebody to tell us, you know what? We don't mind people coming in, just coming in. Can I meet with you? Yes, fine. And saying, you know what? You've been doing this way. No, there's a better way out there, because we're running so fast just trying to keep the lights on that it's hard for us to stop and think. But there is definitely a problem between, for example, if you're a hub zone, and some people are, you better let your small business specialists at each agency that you want to do business with know that, because they're going to want to do business with you. Because it's really hard to meet that goal. The same with a vet zone, very difficult. You think it's easy, it's not easy. So I'll tell you one thing, at CBP, if you're any of those companies or you know companies like that, get them in. We need to know who they are and what they can do, and that they're solid. So I think if you can establish yourself as being a good performer under either 8A program or one of these set-asides, you have a better chance of being a successful mid-tier. The problem is you have to start planning while you're in those other programs to figure out how you're going to be competitive. And if it's coming into a partnership with a company under Eagle, okay, at CBP, we like Eagle. It helps us do our work better. We're supposed to do things faster, better, smarter. If Eagle fits, we're going to use Eagle. We're going to ride with the Eagle, and it works. Can the company's primes on Eagle do all the work? Usually, no. Sometimes there's 20, 30, 40 subs on those contracts. And a lot of times they develop their subs as go-to companies. Why wouldn't you want to be one of those companies if that's your business line? So, or I tell them, if you don't like that, if you're not on Eagle and you're not on First Source and you're upset that we are, go to another department that doesn't have Eagle or First Source and just play in the general GSA space. But that I don't think is a good business model, because there's so much business you can do as a sub on these. These are humongous vehicles. A lot of work goes through them. Is that good?
I think that's good.
You want me to elaborate anything else?
Well, I have a question that I think the audience might want to know about. So, a lot of folks will start with their entry point to an agency at the small business specialist, and that's good. You should do that. We strongly encourage that. But how do they really get to the requiring officials in your agencies? Because those are the folks that own the business. I mean, it's good to talk to the small business folks. It's good to talk to the contracting officers and the contract specialists. But what advice can you give the companies in the room for really tapping into the program analysts or the program managers, the ones that can really, give them the skinny on when something's coming out, if something's coming out, what are you really looking for?
Well, I mean, there's always the cold call, right? You figure out who the right person is and call. But at CBP, we try to do it a little more organized. We have I see Milton Slade, he's one of our senior small business specialists. We have 3 folks. This is what they do full time. You contact one of them, and they reach to the program offices, because usually if there's a meeting, we like to have somebody there just to make sure the conversation doesn't go sideways. So I don't know, how do you do it at ICE? Like if a company wants to come in, they contact you first?
Well, we have as do all the components, we have a small business specialist, and they meet with people who want to come in and get some information about ICE and businesses, and we point them to APFS and Fed Biz Ops and the normal kinds of things. I have a lot of companies that call me, especially after an industry event where you see my name and email address on the overhead, and I will always meet with people, and I know there are people in the room here that have experienced this. If you email me, we will set up an appointment, you can come in and talk. And that's sort of preliminary to getting to meet with our CIO or some of the technical people, because they're extremely busy. These are mission managers. These are people that are managing the delivery of, you know, the IT network to the 20,000 employees, or they're running, you know, investigative operations. So I tend to sort of filter some of those meetings, and if somebody comes in with something that's really useful, I will contact the program office people and say, you know, whether it's in the human capital office or something, these people have something really kind of unique and special, and they have a lot of experience, and I think you ought to meet with them, or we ought to meet with them again to talk about what they have to offer. But that kind of gets me to my one point of advice is, when you want to meet with people, if you come in and say, we can do anything, what do you need? There's a lot of those companies out there. You know, a lot of what we do is fairly publicized. Does anybody not know what ICE or CBP does, you know, every day? So when you come to us with a solution to a problem, either one that we've advertised or one that you've seen that you think you have a solution to, that's what's going to pique interest on the part of the program managers, on the part of the acquisition community. And so, you know, I would recommend when you come in, say, I saw that you're doing this, and I think we have something that could help. That's what's going to pique interest. I mean, if you come in saying, I would like a slice of the Homeland Security pie because we want to grow our business, and that's not a good selling point. That's not as good a selling point. As well as the companies that come in and say, we can do everything. IT, soup to nuts. We can do it all. Nobody can do it all, and we see that with Eagle and some of these other vehicles. You get subcontractors because nobody does it all. They may be good at putting a team together, but we rely on a lot of different capabilities and specialties to get the job done. So focus on what you're good at, come in with a solution we can use, and there's an audience for that, and there's an appetite for that. So that's kind of what we do. I will meet with anybody who wants to, because I can filter out who's got something to offer and who wants to exchange business cards and say they did some marketing by coming in to see a DHS component.
Well, I'll link that to a trend, because this is tips and trends, right?
Yep.
Okay, to me, contracting is very in now. I'm feeling, finally, after all these years. I mean, I go to meetings with our commissioner, and he talks about RFIs. Talk about RFIs in the commissioner's office, and he knows what it is. I mean, 5 years ago, that was just like, it was like alphabet soup, RFP, RFI, RFQ. I mean, nobody got it, but I'm telling you, it's different now. It's different now. So when somebody wants to meet with CBP, sometimes they come to me, and I'll say, Milton or Tony or Yvette, can you meet with this company, see what they've got, and then, you know, they're smart enough to know which operational arm would best suit. And you know what? They know who I am. If I could call the chief of the Border Patrol and say, hey, Carla, you know, somebody came in, it's a really cool idea. And we'll set up a meeting. So it's not just answering the mail when you come in and meet with us. We really need to know what's out there, because the trend is, again, transparency with industry. It's a huge trend. Why do you think we're doing so many more RFIs now? You know, we realize we don't have all the answers. We want industry to know what we need. And frankly, another tip is keep an eye on the RFIs, even if it's not in your business line, because it tells you the direction the agency is thinking of going, you know, what's important. So don't just, oh, that's not in my job bucket, you know, I'm not going to look at it. Well, look at it, because if you want to get a picture of where you might fit, you might see something there. Regarding APFS, because we talked about it before, we were really crappy at it too. You know why? Because everybody has something else to do, and it has to start with the program office. But we've made huge strides as well. So as the use of RFIs go up, the APFS accuracy and keeping it, you know, right, is getting better. We're also doing better with CPARs, you know, so that goes with it too. That's the performance tracking, which is very important. All these things are kind of ticking up in terms of transparency. That the service contract inventory, that thing, if you're in a service contract, you got to go in that system and put that in there. These are all new, transparent things. The Data Act we're dealing with now, all the data has to match all the things we do. I can't even tell you how different it is. But that being said, it puts us on the map. So if you call, you want to come in, you got an idea, we'll get you to the right people. I really think that this is the time.
I'll offer another tip as well. I think that it's important for companies to really understand the NAICS and the PSC codes, the product service codes. I think sometimes there are lost or hidden opportunities there. You may not think you fit into a particular NAICS or a PSC, and you could be losing out on some business. So really pay attention to that. Really dig into those and look at the definitions and see if your core competencies fit into those, and filter the FedBiz Ops and the APFS entries accordingly. I'm sure your business capture folks are doing that, but I would really place an emphasis on that, because I hear a lot from companies that they weren't targeting something because, you know, they didn't, in some cases they think maybe we used the wrong code, which happens. But you've got to pay attention, I think, to a broad array of those things.
Yeah, I'd like to, an interesting little insider tidbit on that. So yes, as CBP procurement, we like to sort of look at what did we spend our money on. So at the end of the year, we come up with like one of those round things with the pie slices on it in different colors, right? But it wasn't doing it for us, because of the buckets of the codes just wasn't speaking to us well enough. So we spent the last 6 months, we had a team of about 4 people, looking at FY16, everything we bought, and came up with our own, the customized version of our own categories. And we're just had a meeting the other day and seeing these categories, and I read them and they make sense. Hey, for the horses, we buy a lot of that stuff. You know, we have a category, we're making up our own category now for things that we really buy. Some of these specific technology things is probably one that says wall now too. But I mean, whereas before, like, where are you gonna put that? Construction? I mean, where do you capture things like that? So I just want you to know that I think it's smart for an agency to see where they're spending their money, so they know where the business opportunities are for folks like you. And at CBP, at least, we're trying to get a better, honest look at really what did we buy, instead of IT services broadly, you know, what was it, or IT hardware, what was it, or any type of other things. So, and that's just extra work, but we felt it was worth it. So we'll see how that works out for us. Internal use.
I'll ask you both one more question. What are your thoughts on the mentor protege program? Is that still something that small businesses should be trying to enter into? Is it useful from your perspective? Do you see, I guess, success?
You don't see it as often as you would think you would. And to be honest, I think that's a question that's probably more appropriate for like the small businesses and the mentors. You know, that you occasionally see some business arrangements proposed, like a joint venture or a mentor protege or something, and you kind of look at that a little bit and you say, well, do I have who's the contractor here? Who's the responsible party? What have you set up here? We contracted with some joint ventures when I was at the Department of the Navy, and it was an evasive tactic to eliminate the partners from being responsible for anything. You know, it was like contracting with a post office box. And I've always told you, when people have come in and asked me, you know, we're thinking of forming a joint venture for this, what do you think? And I said, I'm not a fan, really. If you can't identify a prime contractor that's going to be responsible that we're going to contract with, why are you doing this other arrangement? So mentor proteges, just like in the workplace, you know, there are formal programs where people are required to meet, you know, once a month, and you know, it's like the reserves, you know, every weekend a month and 2 weeks during the year and all. I think these things are better born out of natural affiliations than they are out of like a forced arrangement. So, you know, a company that has been doing some subcontracting work with a large business that's being mentored by some people that are there is probably a better arrangement than some formal agreement that the government can't really understand and get their arms around. Because you still get to responsibility. At the end of the day, we want to know who's delivering to us and what are we getting and what do we do if we don't get what we need, because we can't afford to hear, well, I'm just a protege, don't look at me. Or I was just mentoring them, I'm not responsible for the performance. So I think those things are valuable as development and growth for business opportunities, but as contracting arrangements, they're You don't see them as often as you would think you would, and we do a lot of small business contracting, we do a lot of commercial contracting, and you would think there would be more. You know, I think sometimes small businesses get their advice and counsel from other places besides mentors. So, you know, I don't see it all that much. I don't know what you see.
Well, I think what you said was fine.
Okay.
We'll let that go.
We'll
But I would like to take it
put
a
the
little
lid on
slightly,
that
a little
one.
bit, put a lid on that one. A little- I mean, if a small business is spending its time only marketing themselves to the government, that's wrong. You should be spending just as much time, or if not more, marketing yourself to large businesses, because that's how you're gonna get your in. And it's not a formal mentor program. You just want them to know that you exist, that you can fulfill this niche business for them, faster, cheaper, you know, with not as many people. And I think that a lot of small businesses maybe don't, I don't know if they do that. I think events like this are very valuable. There's a lot of things like this during the year, different sectors of business. I mean, you should be there, meeting the other business people, throwing your cards around. Maybe some of you can get together and have an idea for the government. Wouldn't that be a nice thought? Come to the government as a group and say, hey, we have, you know, the time is ripe for some different ways to engage throughout the whole, small businesses to large businesses to government, small businesses to government. But I don't know how much is going on between the different companies. To think about bringing, you've heard a lot, we have this like Silicon Valley effort. That's really cool. You maybe haven't heard, we're gonna hear about it, I think, next. That's cool. But we could do that, it doesn't have to be Silicon Valley. That's just where we started. But in terms of getting these consortiums of businesses together to help solve a government problem, I mean, that some of it has to start from industry. I mean, I don't think Silicon Valley, I don't know that we knocked on their door. I have a feeling they knocked on our door. I'm just thinking. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm saying is things can come from outside to the government if you organize your thoughts and you get some capability together, and the government will listen, because the government needs you.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to end our portion of this, and then we'll open it up to you all for questions. I'm not sure if Mr. Fulgham mentioned this earlier, if other speakers yesterday mentioned it, but the DHS enterprise is really all-inclusive of not just federal, state, and local government, but it's industry. We absolutely consider you a part of the DHS enterprise, and you are incredibly valuable to the success of this mission. So thank you very much for listening to our thoughts today, and hopefully you find it useful. It looks like we have about 5 minutes left. Maybe we can go a little bit longer, if Bob allows that. Let's go ahead and open it up for questions. I see that there are mics around, so we did not wear our bulletproof vest today, but we'll do our best. There's one over there.
Hi, Joan Canaday with Ambit. The RFIs, I'm very happy to respond to RFIs, but I think you would probably get more response from the RFIs if there was a little nugget at the end of it saying if you do reply to an RFI, you're more likely to come in and have a visit. Because we reply and then it goes into some vault that we never know. Did you get it? What did you think about it? So maybe if there was, I think you would get more response if you knew you were going to get a chance to come in and talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we heard it. Your suggestion for us is to promulgate down to our staffs maybe some kind of feedback mechanism, just so that the companies know that we got it and we're looking at it, and then after I guess we've reviewed it, well, what'd you think? All right. Okay. Yeah, I can see where that two-way feedback is beneficial for you, because then you'll feel more motivated to respond to them if you know that we are at least looking at them and taking them serious.
But we do look at them.
We do.
We really do.
Right, and to follow up on that, we had an industry day back in July for a new ICE initiative dealing with the visa security program. And we got responses. We had a lot of attendance at the industry day, and then we got responses from industry, and then we had over 30 one-on-ones with industry based on the responses, so that we could talk further with companies You know, we realize that in an industry forum like this, people aren't going to raise up and say, I got a great idea, I want to tell you and all my close competitors about this. But we do need the feedback. So we're scheduling one-on-one interviews, meetings with people and the subject matter experts so that we can exchange ideas. So that's well taken suggestion.
See another one here? Yep.
Hi, my name's Jackie Marsteller with Brilliant Corporation. You mentioned a number of different strategic sourcing vehicles, but you didn't mention PAX 2, which is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business vehicle. And it has technology and solutions provisions, as well as lower-end admin support. And there's no fee to DHS. So one of the concerns and questions that we have is, why are you leaning towards other vehicles outside of DHS that do require some fees? And can you make sure to at least take a look, you know, in your RFI process at these existing vehicles?
I think we do. I mean, obviously, the preponderance of what we buy, like certainly at ICE, are not the program and administrative type services. I mean, by percentage, you know, we buy a lot of other things. We do use PAX when it applies, and we try to keep an eye out for that. But you know, with the IT spend and for ICE, you know, the detention and removal spend is, you know, close to $2 billion now of the $3 billion that we spend. So we use, there's a plethora of vehicles to look at, and we examine them all to make sure we're using the appropriate ones.
I would agree at CBP.
We hear that a lot at Coast Guard as well, that we're not really looking at PAX 2 the way that we should be. And sometimes I think that it's a tough call because there's overlap. There are overlap on some of the vehicles, and so.
And sometimes there's timing issues. You know,
Yeah.
it gets, you know, the old one expired, the new one was awarded, but it's protested, you can't use it right now.
Right.
So
You gotta do
you get
something.
into
Yeah.
abeyance, you know, Eagle 2, you know, there were tracks we couldn't use on Eagle 2 for certain amounts of time while protests were being resolved and that sort of thing. So there's timing issues sometimes also. And the show must go on. You know, we do have to buy, we are working on requirements, so we do need to award something somewhere.
Absolutely. See one over here?
Hi, my name's Emily. I'm with Simon Computing. I kind of wanted to touch on the topic of the RFI process. Being a small business, we do respond. I don't know if you guys work across different government agencies, but I know there's a new trend coming up more on the defense side, where there's a formal RFI process where we do respond with our capabilities, but when it comes to particular requirements, allowing the people who are responding to redline the draft SOW or give you feedback using those features. And you know, we have technical people that screen and look at those things and saying, oh, are they really asking for this requirement, or do they understand that is no longer a trend? It gets a little tricky to respond with that when there's page limitations on, like, just give us a 5-page capability statement. But if you really want good meat and good technical feedback on your solutions or requirements, that's a big recommendation. I think, you know, I've seen, particular to the Air Force, something that they're starting to practice with a lot of their IT services, just because understanding what the market's going for and tools and being able to recommend. And, you know, even if you do end up doing like a draft L&M, we can give you comments on what these things, that this is your goal, we recommend wording this way, and this is what this means on the contractor side when we're responding with proposals.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is. So I think I heard, so what might be more valuable in some cases to industry would be to actually inform what L&M and what maybe the statement of work look like with red lines and that sort of thing on a draft document?
Sure.
Okay, interesting. And Air Force is doing that with folks?
Yeah, they're doing it with their RFIs, particularly some of the process over there is more, they'll do like a SOW or PWS, and we actually redline that for them. And then there'll be a full draft for larger efforts afterwards, where if you're really trying to buy the service this way, you should evaluate it this way, just to make sure those things sync up.
Right. Yeah,
I think that just really relates to not trying to do the same thing for every requirement. I mean, depending on where you are in the process. Some RFIs, as you said, they just want like a capability statement because we're not at the definition, we're not even close to like a PWS or a statement of objectives or anything, and we're just looking for who's in that environment or space. And sometimes we kind of have a pretty good idea of what it is because somebody's doing it now. I think we are aware that RFIs do exercise the community some, and we're trying not to just issue them just to say we did one, but to actually get usable information and provide usable information for people. So I think it's a maturing process. You know, we've got, you know, people in committees looking at how to do this better and how to use RFIs to enhance communication as opposed to just checking a block that says, did you do an RFI? Did you do market research? I issued an RFI at 12 o'clock. Responses were due at 1 o'clock. I got 2 responses. They weren't very good, so we're going to go sole source. That's not the purpose of an RFI. We really have genuine exploratory needs, and that's what we're trying to do. So depending on the maturity of the process, that's what we try to do. Another question over there, but we have a red light flashing.
But you had the red light. We'll make this our last question.
Got plenty of time.
Oh, we're good? Okay.
Good morning.
We're good.
Anne-Marie Johnson with Unisys. Thank
We're
you
gonna
so
do
much
like
for being
soccer,
here.
and we're going to reset the clock for some penalty minutes.
Is it okay to continue?
We're good.
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
So actually building on the comment before with regards to RFIs, the DHS Reverse Industry Day in June had a wonderful session on performance-based contracting. And as part of that session, there was a really nice graphic that showed how the components of all the pieces need to align to get to the outcomes that are desired. And I think a nice aspect of that graphic was that it underscored the point made by the previous questioner, which is when the RFI comes out, getting the equivalent of section L&M as well as the statement of work in particular helps us on the industry side to look for that alignment to get the performance-based outcomes and provides us a potential opportunity to help you to see how to get that tighter alignment. So I'd just like to give a shout out to Carla and the great work that she led on the Reverse Industry Day and point back to that picture. And also, I have to do this every time. It was really William Randolph who worked with you guys that helped to create that graphic.
I think it's a good point. To Bill's comment earlier, it really is about timing. It's about how mature the procurement action is. I think we want to always try to do that and get that kind of feedback on the draft RFP when we can do it. But sometimes the RFI is going to be a little bit, you know, less mature, but we still are putting it out in order to pulse the marketplace and see who's out there and who's got the capabilities. But that's a great point. I think when we can, we do try to do that and should do it more. So Bob said we have more time. Are there any other questions? Happy to take them. All right.
Thank you all.
It's your own chance. Any last questions? Okay, well, I want to thank Michael and the panelists for their informative panel session. And in lieu of a speaker gift, we'll make a donation to the AFCEA Hurricane Relief Fund. And I believe that you can actually walk over to booth 307 and make a financial donation to the AFCEA Hurricane Relief Fund as well, if you'd like. And I've done this maybe once or twice over the past 2 days, but I just want to make sure everyone realizes that the U.S. Virgin Islands is the U.S. Virgin Islands, right? So they are our citizens. They need our help. I believe that St. John and the North End saw AI. So there's just incredible devastation there. So anything you can do to help. And if you want more information specifically about where to send things, let me know, because there's a few places that you can send for any of the islands that you may have a preference to donate to. So again, thank you, panelists. Appreciate it very much.